Dr. Ghassan Abu Sittah is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon, and he's joining us live from Beirut. Dr. Abu Sittah, thank you so much for taking the time away from your very important work to tell us about it. So firstly, can you talk to us about the injuries that you've been treating after this unprecedented 12 days of attacks in Lebanon?
Unfortunately, again, children constitute a large part of the wounded. Again, these children are injured inside their homes when their homes have been targeted. So far, we have been receiving children who needed paediatric intensive care. And because of the shortage of paediatric intensive care beds, they've had to be sent from frontline hospitals in the south all the way back to Beirut. And again, having, worked in Gaza during the first 2 months of the genocide there, it's the same story. Families completely destroyed, multiple members of the same family injured. Yesterday, we were discussing trying to discharge one of our cases that we'd operated on, but we realized that they have no home to go back to because they were injured in that home. And so it's an almost identical pattern of injury: blast injuries, shrapnel, people being pulled from underneath the rubble. And again, the same issues that we were facing at the beginning of the war in Shifa. Where do you discharge the patients once you treat them, if where they came from was a destroyed house?
Dr. Abu Sittah, you are one of the world's leading specialists in reconstructive surgery and trauma-related injuries. I know you've worked in many war zones, including Gaza, over the past year that you are talking to us about, and you're saying that you're seeing similar injuries, blast injuries, shrapnel injuries. How do they compare to the other war zones that you've worked in?
It's this fixation with targeting homes. That's what made Gaza different from the very beginning, and what made and one of the things that are very significant about this war. Everybody that is coming to us with wounds is coming to us having been wounded when their houses were targeted, and therefore the disproportionate number of children and women that are being injured and are being killed during this war. There has been a huge number of children who have been killed, I think over 100 so far, and this is only day 5 or 6 of this war. Again, as I had said last year when I started out in Gaza, this feels like a war on children.
Yeah, and in fact, the UN's Agency for Children has called it a war on children, and they've said that Gaza is a graveyard for children. You've talked about, so you're saying that the majority of injuries are from people being injured in their homes, and then they have no homes to go to, and you're seeing this in Lebanon as well. You've talked about the shortage of facilities in Beirut. How are the healthcare facilities there holding up, given the state of the country, especially after the financial crisis there 5 years ago?
Well, as you know, it's been 4 years of financial collapse, with 90% of the currency having disappeared, and a third of the doctors and the nurses emigrating. And so we have an extremely fragile health system. But what's even more worrying over the last few days is that Israeli media outlets and pro-Israeli groups have been starting to circulate the same narrative that militarizes the health system. They've been talking about a Hezbollah-controlled Ministry of Health, the same narrative that they use to justify attacking Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital in Gaza and then eventually turning Shifa Hospital into a mass grave, is now the ground is being laid for future attacks. And I had spent a day up in the south in Nabatiyah with one of the frontline hospitals. And one of the trauma stabilization field hospitals in the south had been hit with a doctor and 7 paramedics being killed. And so we're beginning to see Israel also targeting the health system. And my worry is that they will do that. There were threats, Israeli threats, to the hospitals inside the southern suburb. and the Israelis have been warning these hospitals to evacuate. Again, it's almost like a textbook. You know, on the 12th of October last year, the doctors and the administrators of hospitals in Gaza were receiving phone calls from Israeli army officers saying that they had to evacuate the hospitals or else they would bear the responsibility for any lives lost. And again, now we're starting to hear similar stories.
Just lastly, Dr. Abu Sittah, how difficult is it for you to see the same thing being repeated? And after seeing what you have in Gaza, how do you feel that instead of the war ending, it only seems to be expanding?
You almost lose faith in humanity. At the end of the day, these bombs had been delivered to Israel during the genocide. So the bombs that the Israelis are using were given to it by the United States, by Germany, the United Kingdom, by its Western allies during the conduct of the genocide in Gaza, so that it can use them to further escalate the genocide in Gaza into a full-fledged regional war. And that's what's really morally repugnant about the conduct of these Western governments.
Dr. Ghassan Abu Sittah, thank you so much for joining us on Al Jazeera to talk about the work that you're doing.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.